Yes, hello to you all once again, and another very warm welcome back to Classic Dirt Bike TV. Yes, hello again, and thanks for returning to my CDB TV channel here on YouTube, a channel that's completely dedicated to bringing you more of those old school vintage classics from the way back in the day. And our channel is, of course, also 100% ad-free, so there's no need to watch those long-winded advertisements before getting down to the video posting. So as you know, we're currently in the process of going through all of the footage that we filmed at the 2025 Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show, and I do hope you've enjoyed episode 1, and of course we're now going to continue with the follow-up to that first episode. So let's dive straight into the video and take a look at our second batch of motorcycles. Right, so just to get this episode 2 from Telford 2025 underway, we're going to have a quick look around the TLR Evolution display, who are of course the Honda TLR restoration specialists, and as you can see they'd brought along quite a nice collection of trials bikes with more or less all of them examples of those iconic TLR machines. Now, as far as I'm aware, TLR Evolution are based in Staffordshire in the UK, and they specialise in the restoration, rebuild and modification of these TLR Honda trials bikes. So there's not really anything that these guys can't tackle when it comes to these 200cc 4-stroke machines, and they're also quite a good source of parts if you need bits and pieces to keep your precious TLR ticking over. But their website is quite a good first contact if you need to ask any questions. So if you're a die-hard TLR 200 Honda fan, then why not check them out at this website address. Anyhow, as you can see, these few examples here are all decked out in various types of Honda livery, which I'm assuming are bikes that have recently undergone some kind of restoration at their Staffordshire premises. And although these video clips here were more of the footage that I filmed on the Friday afternoon, there wasn't really anybody around on their display at the time, so I couldn't actually gain any information on individual bikes. Although, as I just mentioned, there's nothing that the TLR Evo guys can't do to these models with regards chassis and engine modifications. So I suspect that these examples here won't be stock standard 200s, but nevertheless they do certainly have the look, that's for sure. Although one of the things that I did notice at Telford this year was that there seemed to be quite another good selection of trials bikes at the show this year, as you're going to see in the forthcoming episodes from this series. So it appears that trials bikes and trials riding in particular still as popular as ever, according to the many clubs and the parts manufacturers that adorned the Telford halls over the course of the weekend. But I expect that these are just a few of the very high quality parts that TLR Evo manufacture for these very popular trials bikes. And we've got a nice hand-crafted alloy swing arm there, and what looks like an immaculately formed alloy exhaust system as well. But you can see that the design and the welding are just superb on these parts, and I'm not even that sure if it's actually TLR Evo who make these parts, or maybe they're supplied from an outside source. But even just sitting here on this table without even being fitted to a bike, these parts are just fantastic metal sculptures in their own right, and they would certainly complement any kind of Honda TLR trials machine. Nevertheless, as I keep saying, I don't know too much about these TLR trialers, but I do remember these little Honda 200 4-stroke engines, which I'm sure are quite a similar engine that was used in the old XR or XL Honda 200s from way back in the day, which, as I remember, was a great little engine and very reliable, although I expect that the guys here at TLR Evolution would probably have improved on its design since then, so I can see exactly why it's been chosen to power these TLR chassis. Now, just a few yards from the TLR display, the Bultaco Club UK were busy setting out their stall, and I just managed to do a quick smash and grab photo shoot on this immaculate 1979 Bultaco Sherpa 350 before the club members squeezed more bikes alongside it. But you can see the condition of this bike. It looks for all the world like an original, and it still has all of its bits and pieces from 46 years ago, although naturally this bike here seems to have undergone a full restoration, because I don't ever remember them looking this good even when they were brand new and sitting on the showroom floor. Now, as to who the actual owner of this bike was, I can't recall offhand, but it might even be another one of those Stephen Jennings bikes, because I know that Stephen's quite a good builder and restorer of these twin-shock Bultaco Sherpas, so this might even be another one of Stephen's creations, although my apologies if that's not the case. But you may remember that these 350T Sherpa engines was quite a good, strong piston port two-stroke, which I'm guessing is a kind of variation of the same engine that maybe would have powered Bultaco's Persang motocrossers, but you can see that this engine here is all painted black, the same as the 1979 Persang motocrossers were in that year. And as I recall, these Bultaco engines had a 5-speed gearbox, so it certainly had plenty cogs inside to cope with most of the terrain that this bike would come across. And normally it was a good, reliable Bing carburetor that was used to feed this engine with its pre-mixed fuel. But you can certainly see that this bike here's in superb condition, which is just about the norm for the kind of quality machines that the Bultaco Club UK usually put on their display here at Telford each year, although they seem to have a much smaller display than last year, but still have some decent quality examples of these Spanish Bultos to look at. Although when it comes to the fuel tanks and panels on these Sherpa Ts, the early Bultacos, of course, as you know, had the fiberglass tank and side pods, but I do remember the 79 motocrossers then changed to plastic in that year, but I'm not sure if that's the case with these Sherpa trials bikes of that same period. But the attention to detail on this bike is quite outstanding. with all of the correct controls, bars and grips, all straight out of the 1970s. And it still has its stock standard exhaust system and tailpipe collector box here at the back. And so, as you can see, I was quite lucky to be able to grab these clips of the bike on the Friday afternoon just before the show opened proper on Saturday morning. But just bore I left the Bultaco boys setting out their stall for the weekend, they'd just wheeled this rare machine from the back of a van to place alongside that 79 Sherpa. And this rare beastie here is Malcolm Rathmell's 1975 works Montesa Kota 348 trials bike, another super rare and original factory machine. But I'm sure you're already familiar with the great Malcolm Rathmell, who was another one of the UK's biggest trials riders, who won a host of accolades during the 1970s and early 80s. And Malcolm won the Scottish 6 Days Trial in 1973 and 1979, and he also won the FIM Trans America Trials Championship back in 1974, and he was also a 6 times winner of the British Trials Championship between 1971 and 1981. That wasn't even to mention that he was also 6-time winner of the Scott Trial between 71 and 1980. So as you can gather, Malcolm Rathmell was pretty handy on one of these old trials bikes, but this one here is his 1975 Montesa Kota that he campaigned in that year after switching from Bultaco the previous year. So as you can imagine, I was quite lucky to be able to film this iconic bike before the Bultaco Club boys put it in place on their display, because I do remember passing by this bike on numerous occasions over the course of the 2 days of the show, when you couldn't even get near it with so many punters admiring its pedigree and its connection with the great Malcolm Rathmell. Although the small scrap of information that I did manage to eke out of the Bultaco club lads on the Friday was that this little Kota 348 of Malcolm's has remained virtually untouched ever since the last day he rode it back in 1975, and I don't think it's even been washed either. So as you can imagine, we're looking at a real piece of motorcycling history here. And I expect that this is just about as original as they come, with all of the component parts that the Montesa factory bolted on to this bike for 1975. But the added bonus on this bike was that it was also a prototype, so that gave the bike a bit more authenticity in terms of it being the real deal. Although whether Malcolm's prototype Kota 348 actually led to the manufacture of production copies of this model, I'm not sure. But maybe all of you trials experts out there will maybe know a little better, because as I said, I'm not up to speed with all things trials related. Which again is probably the same reason that I attend the Telford show each year, because these kind of rare bikes are something that you don't see every day, and proper, genuine, historic items such as this are among some of the ones that you don't see at all. But this was the Rathmell Kota Montesa when it was sitting in its place proud on the Bultaco stand on the Saturday morning, with some nice pieces of photographic memorabilia there of Malcolm and his 1975 Montesa pictured in the background. Anyhow, if you were one of those guys wandering around the Telford show looking to snatch up a bargain and you had a bundle of cash burning a hole in your back pocket, then Peter Williamson brought along some absolute belters of bikes to move on, because he was thinning out his dirt bike collection, and so he was looking to sell a few bikes, starting with this awesome 1995 Honda CR500.
Yeah, this CR500 95, I bought this off a farmer. It had been stood from almost brand new in his barn. It still had the owning marks in the cylinder and everything, and I'd just completely been right through it top to bottom, new bearings, like everything you should do, done the wheel rims, everything, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Yes, an absolutely stunning example of one of these CR500s, a proper open class racer's bike, and not something that you would buy just to totter around the track for a leisurely ride on a Sunday afternoon, because this is a brute of a bike with an engine like a ballistic missile, which, as I remember, I think was said to pump out around the 60 odd horsepower mark, which was usually more than enough power for your average rider to handle. Although, having said that, these CR500s aren't for everybody, because not everybody can actually handle the power from this awesome liquid-cooled two-stroke engine, because in the past I've personally known riders jump from the smaller CR250s onto these bigger open class bikes, thinking that they had the balls and the skills to tame them, and they soon found out that they didn't. But put a top rider in the saddle of one of these CR500 and there's really not much that will touch you on the track. Although you can see that Peter's CR has all the nice trick parts on it, with these Kayaba Pro Circuit front forks and what looks like an upgraded exhaust expansion chamber there as well. Probably an FMF pipe, just like this tailpipe here at the rear, which again is an upgraded replacement to the Honda original, and swapping these new pipes for the originals isn't just to make the bike better to look at. They do actually make a slight improvement in performance riding it on the track. And also here at the back end, a good strong box section alloy swing arm and some SM Pro Platinum alloy wheels, which, to be fair, don't look too bad on this 1995 bike, even although they are black. But for me, black wheels on an old 1960s, 70s or even 80s classic bike are a definite no-no. So there you go, that's just the first of many bikes that Peter was offering up for sale on the day. And if you're in the market for a good quality race bike, then here's the asking price of the big Honda and the contact details for any of the bikes that you're about to see in Peter's collection.
YZ250H. Bought this from California, very low hour bike. Again, never had the engine strip when I bought it. Went through it, still on a standard piston. Put new main seals like you would do. Been right through it top to bottom, as you can see. Again, a low hour, absolute beautiful bike.
Yes, another cracker from Peter's collection, this YZ250 Yamaha, as he said, that came from the USA, and as I remember, I think Peter said that it was a 1980 or possibly even a 1981 bike, which again, as you can see, is in immaculate condition, which was certainly one of the things I did notice about Peter's assortment of bikes, was that each and every one was in such good condition. And this YZ was particularly good, and I think it would make an excellent race bike, because I'm sure you already know that these Evolution YZ250s are very popular with the Evo riding fraternity, and these 250s make a great clubman race bikes, because they're not as hard to ride as the much bigger 490 YZs, and they have a much nicer, smoother spread of power. And again, it looks like our YZ250s had a replacement front pipe, which is no surprise at all on a bike of this age, but nevertheless complements the rest of this bike's stunning good looks. And you can just about see that monoshock suspension unit there tucked up inside the swing arm, but this is another quality bike from Peter's collection, which I'm not sure if this one here, or indeed any of the machines that Peter was selling on the day, were actually sold, although here's the particular asking price for this YZ250H. Anyhow, the good bikes just appeared to keep coming on the Peter Williamson stand, and this next bike here is an Eric Gabor's built Suzuki RM400.
Suzuki RM400, Gabor's bike. I bought it off Gabor's. I thought I'd give it a try. Honestly, I've never rode it. It looks great and it's built really well. He builds a good bike. I've never used it, so I've too many bikes at the moment, so I'm going to sell it. If I don't sell it, I'll give it a go.
Now, I certainly have to agree with what Peter just said there, that Eric Gabor's does build a good bike, because I've seen quite a few examples of these Gabor Suzukis before, and they all seem to be quite well put together machines. And these are basically an updated version of the old Suzuki twin shockers of the late 1970s and early 80s, but they've got a few improvements over the stock standard bike. So this was yet another machine that Peter was looking to move on, and it would be great to be able to see this one take to the track once again, and maybe relive those glory days of the great Suzuki twin shockers. Now, there was one final bike in Peter's display that caught my eye, and it was this stunning 1976 400 Maico twin shocker, which, to be truthful, if I had the cash with me in my back pocket on the day, I'd probably have put an offer in for this bike myself, because it was such a lovely looking bike, and being sold for a fair price, I might add.
1976 400 Maico. I went all the way to Belgium to pick this up. Absolutely cracking bike. I rode it last year in the pre-78 class with a lot of success. Great little bike, but I'm doing the over 60s now on the bigger twin shock stuff. That's a really good bike, and I couldn't find a good one, so I had to, like I said, I went all the way to Belgium for it. Cracking bike.
And again, as Peter said, they're a cracking bike, and another nice example of one of these AW or Adolf wheel twin shock Maicos from the 1970s, when, of course, these old Maicos were among some of the finest European scramblers that you could buy at that time, which was, of course, just before the Japanese began to flood Europe with their 250 Red Rocket Hondas at the end of the 1970s, and smaller manufacturers like Maico just couldn't compete with the sheer volume of bikes that were coming from Japan. But as you can see, Peter's AW400's not a fully original example from 76, because it's got quite a few upgraded components from the ones that it would have had 49 years ago, like this aftermarket exhaust and tailpipe, and of course a nice pair of YSS piggyback shockers on the rear. But that doesn't mean that it's not the same bike from 76. It's just that for a bike that's almost 50 years old now, you're never going to have the original parts still fitted to it. So if you're going to replace them, then why not just put parts on the bike that's going to make it handle and run that little bit better, especially if you're still going to use it as a race bike and not one of these museum pieces. But for me, personally speaking, I'd certainly like to buy this bike if I had the cash and, of course, the go-ahead from a much higher power, which I don't think would happen because she doesn't like motorbikes, so I would have to come up with some covert undercover scheme to try and sneak this bike into my garage, but I expect it would be worth it in the end. So this was the asking price for this 1976 400 Maico, which I thought was quite fair considering what you were getting for your money. But if you have any interest in any of these machines that Peter's selling, then why not give him a buzz on this number. So next up, this was another bike that somebody was advertising for sale at the show, and the bike was billed to be either a 1979 or 1980 Italian Aprilia 125, another quite rare Italian stallion, but certainly a bike that looks all original and in quite good condition for a 45-year-old twin-shock racer. And with regards its actual sale price, it was being offered for £2,500 or nearest offer. So again, a quite decent price for a piece of rare European motocross history, although there wasn't any contact name or number supply with the details of the bike, so I'm unable to give the vendor a bit of free advertising here on my channel. But just in case you're not up to speed with these Italian ponies, these bikes here were powered by an Italian manufactured Hyro two-stroke engine, which not only powered these motocrossers, but a multitude of other European-made trials bikes and off-roaders, and even the British-built Alan Clues CCMs used these Hyro engines in the 1979 and 1980 motocrossers while they were still building their big BSA four-strokes alongside them. But they were still quite a good little motor, and as I remember, quite quick as well, although I'm sure that this 79 or 80 two-stroke was the last of the air-cooled Hyros, because I think they switched to the liquid-cooled engines in 1981. And up here at the front end of our Aprilia 125, it's still got its factory-fitted Corti Cosso front forks, which, as I remember, weren't exactly the best suspension systems for one of these old twin-shock motocrossers. But again, this was the suspension technology of its day, so you just had to work with what you had. So you can see it was old school drum and shoe brakes up here at the front and at the back. And just to try and help keep the rear of this Aprilia from hopping all over the track, it was another pair of Italian-made Corti and Cosso rear shocks that had remote gas and oil reservoirs to contain all the fluid in the gas for the shocks. Now again, these Corti Cosso shocks weren't exactly top of the range units, so it was quite a good thing that we had a generous amount of padding in this Aprilia seat. Now, for 1979 or even 1980, most off-road builders were now moving away from steel or alloy fuel tanks in favour of these lighter and much cheaper to produce plastic fuel tanks. But looking around this Italian stallion, I must say that everything does look proper and correct on the bike, which is quite rare for an off-roader of this kind of vintage, because all of these control cables and levers certainly all look like the real deal. So for a nice original Italian motocrosser for just £2,500 or nearest offer, this for me was certainly one of the bargains over the course of the 2 days. Right, so just to finish off this episode 2 from the Telford 2025 Dirt Bike Show, let's take a quick look at the D&G Restorations display, or I think it's Damien and Gledhill Vintage Restorations to give them their full title. And the guys at D&G always seem to have some interesting bikes on their stand each year, and this KX Kawasaki was certainly another beauty. But just in case you haven't already noticed, this particular 1980 420 KX Kawasaki is not your 1980 original rear monoshock bike. This one here's undergone some surgery at its back end to convert it to twin shocks, so that it'll be eligible to race in the very popular twin shock racing classes at local scramble events, because it now qualifies virtue of the fact that it has old school drum brakes on the front and at the rear, and of course an air-cooled engine, but more importantly those two twin shocks here at the back. So the 1980s KX420 reed valve two-stroke was certainly quite a good, reliable and pretty quick engine for its day, and it had very little in the way of vices when it came to putting the power down onto the track. And I'm sure it was around the 37 or so horses that this 5-speed engine was supposed to punch out. But I do remember young Aaron telling me on the day that this engine here has had a complete rebuild recently, so I would imagine that everything internally's been taken care of inside this engine. Now, as I remember, the stock 1980 monoshock KX420 was still a decent bike, but it was kind of let down by the operation and overall geometry of its back end, which didn't have the best reputation for rebound and damping characteristics, which I'm guessing is probably why the guys at D&G have converted it to twin shocks at the rear. But from what I remember young Aaron telling me on the day of the show, he says converting this bike to the old school twin shockers has totally transformed the overall handling of this 420. So as you can see, it's another superbly turned out bike from the guys at D&G Vintage Restorations, and in the past we've certainly covered quite a few of their restos and rare bikes here on my channel, and this converted KX420 from 1980 appears to be another very nice specimen from their workshop. Although if you think that this might be something you might be interested in, then why not just get in touch with Aaron at this number, or maybe better still, just have a look at their Facebook page for more details. Okay, so these here are just a few of the bikes that we're going to be having a look at in episode 3. So as I've said, now would be a very good time to subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out in what's coming up in future episodes from the Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show 2025.